Hey everyone, Aziz and Alex here. We're recording another timeout segment just as a part of our little introduction, just to kind of wrap. We had a funny, interesting thing we wanted to talk about. Aziz, tell us about your Instagram messages.
Yeah, so occasionally we do post little things here and there talking about some of the stuff that we're doing, or even like showcasing some of our guests and the stuff that they've done. And we get mixed messages. We get people that are like, "Oh, that's so awesome! How can I do this? Blah blah. Can I get more info?" And then we also get folks that are like, "Ah, there's a catch. This, that, or the other. Somebody gave them, their family members gave them money, or they had inside connections, or whatever." So it's kind of like an interesting dynamic there. I mean, I definitely had similar feelings at the beginning. It's like, oh, if they made it, they probably made it because they had some sort of advantage. And sometimes that's true, but not necessarily all the time.
Yeah, it is.
Alex, what do you think?
It's just interesting because it goes back to mindset, right? It goes back to like, if someone is ahead of me, the first response is, why can they do it, but I can't, right? And I'll admit
Mm-hmm.
that for me, sometimes like I'll admit, oh, it's because it's a white man, or it's because, it's a rich person, or whatever it is. I'm looking for excuses why they can do something and I can't. And that's obviously debilitating, right? And so it's definitely one of the things that we all have to really be conscious of. And it's been funny as we have these conversations with people, because people respond. People are skeptical. People are like, and I think you called it like a BS meter, right? People are like, I don't know if I believe that this is even possible, right? Like,
Yeah.
but then that's a big part of why we try to have these guests on the show, is to show you these are real people, and they tell you their story, and they tell you about their struggles. And, everyone has their advantages, their strengths and their weaknesses. But I think at the end of the day, it's really all about mindset. It's really all about getting those debilitating thoughts out of our head. So,
Yeah, no,
it's
completely. Now, I'm
interesting.
not saying that there aren't obstacles and hindrances. I mean, obviously, if you come from like a wealthy background and you've got all these big, rich connections, it's a lot easier to become wealthy and do a lot of these things. But even if you don't have that background, you can still do all of this stuff. It just takes a lot of hustling and networking. Really, networking is really what it all comes down to. And
Yeah, I'll
that's
give
what we
one
try to
example of that.
showcase on the show. Examples. Yeah.
It's a really interesting one. So I'm an advisor for people who are new to apartment investing in a different community. And when people come in and they're starting to analyze deals, they'll come to me with questions, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm analyzing this deal, but the numbers aren't working out, or maybe I'm missing something. Can you look at it for me?" And I'll go over it with them, and we'll do a Zoom, and we'll go over it. And this one woman in particular brought me, I think it's the biggest deal I had ever looked at, right? Like, and she's a beginner starting from zero. And she brought me a deal that I think was at like $60 million. It was something like, it was like 2,000 units
The
in
first
one
timer.
deal. First time. And then, I asked her, because I was like, so if you get this deal under contract, like, how do you plan on getting it across the finish line? Because those are some big numbers. And she just said, I have a few friends who are in, what was the word? In private equity. So she just kind of like had the connections, but she had the confidence. That's the thing. That's like, even though like she's an inexperienced person, she's coming to me to ask help, but she believes that she could do it. And that's where I was like, hats off to you, like just the confidence, and obviously having the connection, right? I think she said it was her brother was like some hedge fund dude or something like that. I was like, okay, cool. So you can get to the money, but the truth is we can all get to the money. We can all find a way to get that connection, to get in the room with those people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's exciting.
And because I mean that example will tell people like, haha, you have to have rich connections and be rich to do it. But then we also, I mean, we interviewed a kid. I mean, all he had was around $300 in his pocket. That was it. And he was in his 20s. $300 in his pocket. He just randomly started cold calling. He looked up major big apartment complexes and real estate developments in his area, found who owned them, cold called them after looking them up online. And it was like, can you give me some pointers, some tips? Let me talk to you. Let me get to know how you got to where you are. And he made those connections with those wealthy people. He was not wealthy himself, had zero background in anything, zero connections. But slowly he just built up a network with all these wealthy people just by just cold calling them out of the blue. And, it's surprising how helpful people are in this like investor community. They not only started giving him tips and advice and guiding him through everything, they actually helped him finance his first set of deals, multi-million dollar deals. Mind you, he only had $300 in his pocket. And these people were basically giving him multi-million dollar deals and said, I'll act as your bank. You just borrow the money from me and just pay me back from the income you make off these properties, which I already own, but I'm going to sell to you at a discount. And now he's a millionaire himself. $300, zero connections to start with. So it really is a mindset.
Yeah, literally went from zero to millionaire. I mean, I think I don't even want to spit the wrong number, but they're millionaires. And they did it in a matter of like 2 years, 3 years. It's totally doable. And it's just about like believing it and then taking the action to get ourselves there. So just a little reminder about why mindset is so important, So please feel free to keep that in mind and enjoy the show. And thanks for tuning in, guys.
Hey guys, it's Clint Coons here, and I am on Screw the Stock Market with Alex and Aziz, and I'm going to be talking about asset protection for real estate investors, for any type of investor, and how you can make sure that you're not only protecting your assets, but also lowering your taxes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screw the Stock Market, where we focus on alternative assets outside of the stock market with the goal of attaining freedom of our time, freedom of our finances, freedom of our lives. So today we have a really awesome guest, Clint Coons, and I think this was one of the coolest episodes we've had. What do you think, Kaziz?
I think it was a great episode. And, just to kind of give a quick recap, he's an attorney and he's also a very avid, successful real estate investor as well. So he kind of really presents a kind of like really deep insider view on how to, invest and how to protect your assets, more importantly, and how to keep making more money using the knowledge that he's gained from both sectors. It's a really good episode in the sense that he kind of drew into perspective that a lot of times when you go to attorneys, they don't normally have the perspective of a real estate investor. So there's little tidbits and tips and strategies that they don't think of that could make you and save you so much more money on the back end. They'll do the basics to protect you, but it doesn't maximize what you can potentially get out of that relationship compared to someone who's an attorney and also an investor as well and has gone through the process. So it was really eye-opening, and he does really present a lot of really great and cool tidbits.
I like them. Actionable things, right? There's really, I mean, again, you're going to see them, but there's just actionable things that you can take and start to implement, or at least start to strategize. Because I said it in the interview, but when you talk about asset protection, you think, oh, that's defense, that's fearful, that's, how do I avoid losses? But he talks about asset protection and structure as a way to grow faster, as a way to multiply your gains and kind of reach the moon. So it's really exciting. And I think his company is there specifically to serve entrepreneurs and real estate investors. So if this content resonates with you, feel free to reach out to him and see how he can help, because it's clear he's really knowledgeable, and I hope you guys get a lot of value from the show. Hey there, thank you so much for tuning into the show. It means so much to me and Aziz that you are actually listening, that there's people really listening to the show. We're having fun with it, and we hope that you're getting a lot of value too. Education is just one of the first steps that anyone should take when they're on a journey towards financial freedom or personal development. And so it's great. You're doing the right things. I want to suggest a second step that you might want to consider if a lot of the things that we're talking about on the show are resonating with you. Consider visiting our website, legatoinvest.com/invest. And there's a button where you can click to gain access to our opportunities. And what will happen is you'll schedule a call with us. We'll talk, we'll get on a Zoom, and we'll get to know your investment experience. We'll get to know you. We'll learn about your objectives. And then if it's a good fit, we'll actually start to present you with real investment opportunities from time to time. and you'll be in the driver's seat where you can say, no, I don't like that one, and yes, I do like that one. And those real decisions, that means that you're actually in the game towards your financial freedom. So consider visiting legatoinvest.com/invest. Again, that's LEGADO invest.com/invest.
Hi, everyone. And today we've got a special guest, Mr. Clint Coons, who is the founding partner of Anderson Business Advisors. It's a large-scale firm dealing with asset protection, tax reduction, estate planning. He's also a published author. He's got his book, Asset Protection for Real Estate Investors, and he's going to be giving us some tips and advice today on how to kind of protect ourselves in these difficult times these days. So, Clint, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I mean, you hit it right there. I'm an attorney, but I also built a firm from about 15 employees after a year of starting to now just shy of 500 with offices in a few different states, Washington State, Nevada, Wyoming, and Utah. And along that journey of building up this business and several other businesses, I've also invested in real estate. So I have a sizable real estate portfolio, well over 300 properties, multiple asset classes. And I've learned that wealth generation, passive income generation can truly be obtained by investing in real estate. And what's so unique about your program is, when you say screw the stock market, I'm with you 100% because I've been there. That's how I cut my teeth.
Well, that's really exciting. We're honored to have you on. And, I'm sure we'll get into some of the hate on the stock market and all those Wall Street fat cats. But let's start with some of the positive side. Let's start with so what are some of the first lessons that you'd like to start with for our audience? Asset protection sounds broad. It sounds really big. Where do you think someone who might be just starting off, like, I might have my single family home, I might have another rental property. Where do you think someone like that should start with asset protection?
Well, see, it really comes down to understanding that if you're an investor, you really have to treat it as a business. Look at it like a business. And that if you set up the right structures for your investing, you're actually going to be able to do more much quicker. And a lot of people are not aware of that because they seek out professionals who are not investors themselves. And so when they talk to them about, hey, I've heard about corporations, limited liability companies, trusts, things of that nature, they tend to get a negative reaction because the professional they're speaking with, they're not investing. They don't have a lot of investor clients. And therefore they, fall to the default. Well, just load up on insurance and you'll be fine. Most people don't ever get sued. Now, there's a lot of truth in that. Most people are not going to be sued that own real estate. I've never been sued as a real estate investor. I've had some close calls this past year. 2 homes burned to the ground, and the tenants luckily got out in time. And I've had a tree fall through a house before into the master bedroom, narrowly missed the tenant that was sleeping in the bed. But if it does happen, all right, you got to sit back and say, all right, what's at risk? And it's that mindset of understanding why we invest, that so many people look at it from the wrong perspective. They think of equity in their property and that's what they're trying to protect. And they don't realize it's income. That's why we're investing many times for a lot of us. And the threats don't only come from the real estate, they come from external as well, things that you do. You can get sued for contract claims. You're involved in an accident. Maybe it's in your professional career. A lawsuit develops. And so we really want to put together a plan that addresses that, but also maximizes the tax benefits that comes through those types of investments. At the same time, that plan, if you do it right, guarantee it's going to help you get more deals done because it's going to make you look better to lenders. And so that's my approach.
So that sounds nice and sounds holistic, but how do you kind of start getting into that whole mindset and that framework? I mean, what's the first step that you normally take in terms of kind of protecting yourself in that sense?
Well, the way I approach it, I tell people, as I said, first understand why you're investing. Okay. When I first started investing in real estate, I looked at it as, well, I've got 50 grand into that property, and I bought my second property, and I have 60,000 into that. I'll just put them together in one entity, and I'm going to have protection. I have $110,000 at risk in equity, and I got insurance on it, so I felt comfortable. But it wasn't until I got really serious with my investing and I started working with other investors where I'd sit down with them and I would see, someone that has accumulated 20 properties in about 4.5 years. And then I'd see some other investor that's on their fourth property after 10 years. And it really piqued my interest. What are these guys doing that they're able to acquire property so quickly? Most people think, all right, they won the lottery or they inherited the deals. And yeah, there are a few of those sprinkled throughout, but the unicorns were the ones that had figured this out, how to put together structures that made themselves look better to lenders, which I'll describe to you, but also recognize where their risk is and what they're trying to protect. And that's the cash flow. So I often tell people when you're starting out, I will put one property per LLC. And if you say, well, that's a cost, well, then you're already in a preservation mindset when it comes to your investing. You're probably going to take you a long time to get to where you want to be if that's the way you're thinking. I look at it as an investment that by putting that entity in place, what is it going to do for me rather than what is it going to do to me as far as getting that thing set up? Because the first time you're involved in a lawsuit, I guarantee you're going to be looking around going, man, I sure hope my stuff's protected really well because they're going to be threatening to take everything you have. And the more that's hanging out there, the less maneuverability you have to address that lawsuit. And if you lost both properties and they're throwing off, say $10K a year total, I don't look at it as losing $110,000 in equity. I just look at it losing $10,000 a year in annual income. And if my lifestyle changed because of that 10K, that's going to have a tremendous impact on me. So I want to be able to preserve that, is what I tell my clients. So maybe you lose one property in a bad experience, so it cuts your income in half, but you still have $5,000 a month or on an annual basis coming back in.
And that's because you've divided it into two different kind of companies, essentially.
Correct.
I love the way that you frame this because you say asset protection. It automatically sounds like a defensive kind of fear-based, kind of a service or a mentality. But what you're talking about is essentially an offensive growth abundance mindset that can come from this. So that's really exciting. Now the questions are starting to come to me, but I don't want to sidetrack you yet with my questions. So, okay. So now we're talking about one property per LLC. Let's get to that, how to grow our portfolio really quickly. That's really exciting. So now we're doing this one property per LLC. For most people, and I'll use myself as an example, I remember my first move into investing was I'm going to buy a second home and keep my first home as my investment property. And that was, okay, now I'm a landlord. Now I'm in the game, right? And then I had to start saving up slowly and surely. It was going to take me another 5 years to be able to save up for a down payment for that third property, if I'm lucky, right? So how is someone able to scale up using asset protection to be able to get to that third home more quickly?
Well, so the scale up is twofold. First off, you throw the tax side onto it. So you look at your investment that you're getting involved with, and you say, all right, if my down on this deal is going to be $40,000, and I need $25,000 for my next deal, $30,000 for my next deal, how long is that going to take me to save up that type of money? Well, for some people it might be 3 years, but to the, I would say business-minded investor, it probably take them about 2 or 3 months, because what you should do is when you buy that property, look at, all right, how am I going to get that down payment back? Well, the way I'm going to get that down payment back is I'm going to use the tax code to go in, perform a cost segregation study on that property, and I'm going to then take that cost segregation study and use it to reduce my taxes. So on that money that I'm generating from my W-2 job, I'm going to qualify myself under that short. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a short-term rental property to begin with. I'm going to start off with a short-term rental for the first year when I place it in service, just so I can tap in and get that money back. So now I can get my down payment back through tax savings. So I'm able to go out there and accelerate my growth. So rather than waiting 3 years, I'm only out 2, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is, until I get my return done. And I'm not having to pay that to the IRS, or they're sending me a check back. Then I turn it back into long-term rentals. And so it's understanding that aspect of it. The second aspect of using the entities and the structuring is getting down to the point is, where am I getting my funding from? Am I using qualified mortgages? The standard stuff that you get through Chase and your broker, that when you go out there, you're looking for a loan, which is underwritten by Freddie Fannie, or are you going to non-QM lenders? Most people are going to work with the QM market because no points, lower points, better interest rates, less down. And so that's more attractive to them. But the problem is that when you go into that market, they're all underwriting with the same guidelines, Freddie Fannie, because that's who they want to sell it to. And if you're not aware of how their guidelines work and you just own properties in your own name or through disregarded LLCs that hit your 1040, they're actually going to take between 25 to 30% of your income away from you when it comes to qualifying for that mortgage. And so as we buy more, that debt to income ratio is going to start getting squeezed a little tighter. And the problem you run into is that it gets squeezed down even further when they're telling you, yeah, you made $100,000 in rental income, but we're only going to give you credit for 70. You're like, well, why is that? Well, it's because Freddie Fannie requires we hold back for vacancies. And so now you don't qualify for this next loan. But it's so easy to get around that if you set up the right entity structure and you treat it as a partnership coming down onto your 1040 with a K1, you get 100% of that income. So now you look great when you're going in for qualifying for financing. Same type of income, just hit your tax return in a different spot. They give you 100%. So that's what I mean by entities can help you build faster, because now as you start to go in that growth phase, they're not going to compress your debt to income ratio as quickly as it would the other ways. And then when you're setting up the entities, I tell people, hey, if you're using QMs to finance your deals, then you want to make sure, let's say you're married, you're doing one for one. I see so many investors make this mistake. They go out, they buy it together in their own name, and they don't realize that they can only qualify for 10 properties like that. After that, they're going to cut them off. So what you should be doing is put one in the husband's name, one in the wife's name. You go back and forth like this as you're acquiring them, and then transfer them into LLCs and establish your joint ownership that way. But for financing purposes, you only got one owner, so you can get 20 of those more favored deals, as people like to, as the way they look at QM mortgages.
So that's great stuff. Like really good stuff. But I want to just kind of put it out for if you could define what a QM is for some of our new investor listeners who are not familiar with all the terms and lingo yet.
So a QM mortgage is a qualified mortgage. So if you walk down to Wells Fargo, said, hey, I want to get a loan to buy an investment property, they are going to underwrite that mortgage as a qualified mortgage, which means they're using Freddie Fannie underwriting guidelines. And so their guidelines are very specific. All they do is they take your information, they put it into a system and check, qualify, check. Oh, nope, you don't qualify. And you're out. Whereas a non-qualified mortgage, you're looking at the private market, hard money lenders, portfolio lenders. I often tell people, if you're a real estate investor, the first thing you should establish is a relationship with the community bank. Because what they're going to do many times is they'll save your butt, potentially, if you're trying to go down that QM route and that falls out in financing because the underwriter won't do the deal because of whatever they found on your tax return or whatever they see they don't like. Use that community lender as a backup because they're more forgiving, because community lenders, they tend to treat their loans as what we call portfolio loans. So they're not selling those loans to Freddie Fannie. They're going to keep them in-house. And so when it comes to evaluating or underwriting a deal, they have different lending standards than a Wells Fargo. In fact, the building I'm in right now, US Bank tried to screw me over on this deal. I went through 3 extensions on my purchase and sale agreement on this. I waived my financing contingency. I waived my earnest money on this deal with US Bank. I kept getting assurances. They're going to do the deal. 10 days from closing, they show up in my office. And this guy comes into the broker I was working with, brings in 2 other guys. And I knew what they were going to say. And they said, we're not going to do your deal. I wanted to punch them because I had, $75,000 on the line. And I was looking around going, what do I do now? And this was before I had developed relationships. Somebody told me, experienced investor, he goes, go down to a community lender. So I went down to First Citizens Bank, said, hey, I'm going to open up an account with you. I'd like to do business with you. What can we do to get a loan done? They said, no problem. 10 days we closed. And it saved my bacon.
Wow.
And so I've done many deals with them since.
I was going to say, you're a saint for not punching them.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to throw them out on their ears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beyond ridiculous.
Yep.
And we actually have another episode on the show where we actually talk about the importance of building that banker, investor relationship. I mean, like, your banker should be your best friend, and those small community banks are gold mines.
Correct. I mean, I bank with Chase on the business side, and I run a fair amount through Chase. And because they're a big bank, they're not as flexible. They can't do much for you. And so when you go to them, you say, hey, I need a loan. It's not going to be the spit in the standard situation. They're like, oh, yeah, we love you as long as you keep running money through us. But as soon as you need money, if you don't fall in this, you're no longer in that love relationship.
Yeah, you're just another cog in the machine.
Yep.
Now, there's something else that you mentioned that I really want to go back to, which I thought was, I think I know what you were getting at, but I wanted to ask you to clarify. So you mentioned that with that property, your intent would be to first have it as a short-term rental before turning it into a long-term rental, and it seemed to have some relationship with
taxes.
Was it the depreciation?
Yeah,
is that right? Can you explain that a little bit more in depth? I think that's something that I've been looking for a long time, because for a lot of our investors who are passive investors with W-2, they're not able to really take the full benefit of that depreciation. And I think what you're talking about might do that.
Yeah. So whenever we work with an investor, what we're doing is we ask a lot of questions, and we back into the structuring, the planning, and help them decide what is going to be the best plan for you based upon your investing strategies and what you want to do. And sometimes, we give them a recommendation that they hadn't even thought about before. And short-term rentals is something that we've been crushing it with for the past 4 years, where someone will buy a piece of property and they're going to turn it into a long-term rental. That's with their intent. And we'll show them, if you treat it as a short-term rental, you're going to be able to harvest all these tax deductions. Because if you make it a long-term rental, you have to qualify as what we call a real estate professional. 50% of your time in a real estate related trade or business, 750 hours in that trade or business. And then you have to spend 500 hours, which is a safe harbor, on your own real estate. So check. Can you do that? Most people have a W-2 and they can't. But if you go down the short-term rental road, it's much simpler, because the short-term rental approach, it takes you out of Section 469, which is the passive income loss rules. And it states that short-term rentals, by their very default, are not passive in nature like long-term rentals are. And therefore, if you want to materially participate and turn those losses into ordinary losses, all you have to do, the minimum test, is show that you spent 100 hours and more time than anyone else on that activity. And now they qualify. Reps don't even have to worry about it. So I've got a lot of physicians that crush it with that strategy. And so they use it, take the deductions, and then flip it back into a long-term rental. I mean, I went down the short-term rental route one time, and I knew it wasn't for me after 2 years of a property investment I made in Hawaii. Like, this sucks. It's not my personality to deal with tenants on a day in and day out basis. And I know a lot of people are that way, and that's their initial hesitation. But he said, you just got to get it done. And your average rental period, by the way, has to be 7 days or less. So you got to make sure you're renting it for 7 days or less. Now, people say, well, how many times do I have to rent it out? I just said your average editing's 4.
Sorry about that. For some reason, my computer just booted me out.
Sure. So I'll just pick up from where I said 7 days or less.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so your average rental period only has to be 7 days or less. And when you look at that, what I'm saying to you is, if you bought the property, for example, in October, and you rent it out one time between October and December 31st for a period of 7 days or less, you qualified. Now, the only problem is, how do you get 100 hours if you only rent it one time? Well, in that instance, what we'll typically do is we'll have people rent it out for 7 days or less. If they plan to do the rehab work, I'll say, get that first one done. After that, stop, take the tenants out, or don't rent it out anymore. Do all your rehab work, manage all the rehab work, so you're building up your hours. And that hopefully will get you over that hurdle and then put it back into service. Because the other key is with real estate, you're not going to get the deduction if it's not in service. So that means you're not renting it out. So you just couldn't buy it, start doing a bunch of rehab work on it, and then get a deduction. And so a lot of times with our strategies, what we'll also look at is, let's say you bought a house, you bought it for $300,000 and it needs, I don't know, 100K or 75K of rehab. So what I'll see a lot of investors do is they'll go in and they'll do the rehab work and then they'll start renting out the property. Oftentimes I'll say, listen, rent the property for a little bit, short-term rental basis, get somebody in there. I don't care if it's your neighbor, rent it to your neighbor for 2 days. Get that done so you got it in service. Now take it and do a cost seg study on it, on everything you're going to rip off the property, roof, HVAC, kitchen, whatever you're getting rid of. You'll get a deduction for the remaining useful life of those assets. So in that example, maybe you're talking $40,000 of remaining useful life for your rehab. So you get to deduct whatever you're pulling out plus the cost to remove it. So you do a cost seg there, you get $40,000 deduction. Then you do your rehab work, and then you go back in and you do a second cost seg on the entire property. And in my example, maybe you pick up another $120,000. So you have $160,000 now you take and you apply it against your $80,000 in income you're bringing in on a W-2. You just wipe out 2 years of income, provided, again, you meet the 7 days or less than 100 hours. And so it's those types of strategies with real estate where you say, well, how do some people acquire more? It's because they're looking at it from that business side, not just on the investment side. And so many CPAs and attorneys, they're not investors. And so they're not thinking along that way. I mean, I do fairly well, and I'm looking for every tax deduction I can get just for myself, not only for our clients at Anderson, because at our firm, we have both CPAs and attorneys, and we work in conjunction to help our clients do what I'm just describing.
You're blowing my mind, Clint.
This is really exciting.
I was going too deep. I'm sorry. But,
no. This is awesome. This is so valuable because, like I said, it's come up. And so now I want to ask just a question for myself, as long as I got you. So, so when we do syndications,
yep.
Our structure with our partners has been, I'll have my LLC, a partner will have their LLC. Our passive investors will come in and join in as part of this bigger LLC. And so as of now, these two little LLCs, or I'll just speak for myself. I have my LLC, which is a member of the new LLC that's created just to purchase this asset. The next deal will come along and it'll be the same LLC that is a member of the new LLC that's meant to purchase the new asset.
Mm-hmm.
But what you said is that I should have separate LLCs for every deal. And I want to know, as a syndicator, should I have a new company for every deal as the general partner?
No, you already have. Oh. So are you structuring your syndications as limited partnerships or LLCs?
LLCs, but I guess we use the language of limited partner for the passive investors and general partners for the sponsors of the deal. So and we have our
So I'd be a little careful on that one. The language I would have managers and members. And
okay, I like that.
So, don't confuse it with GPs and LPs, because that implies it's a limited partnership, and a general partner in a limited partnership takes on full liability for anything that goes wrong with that LP, whereas a manager of an LLC doesn't have any liability, of course, unless they're negligent. So if you're taking, your promote and you're pulling that through the LLC, I don't know if you have any carried interest there or what you're doing on the side with your syndication. I would set them up in different LLCs, unless who's going on the docs for the funding.
So so it's in our deal so far. It's been my partner and I kind of signing on those lines in the name of the LLC as members. He said.
Yeah. So I don't know if the lender because you got that experience ratio too that you need to pull into those deals. And if they're going to look at that LLC and see how many other deals it's done, and that's critical to get your deal done, maybe you use the same LLC. But if you don't have to, I would set them up as separate ones, because if a syndication fails, and you say you have three of them, and that one LLC is involved in all three, and they all sue that one LLC, well, then those other two survivors could potentially be at risk. So by separating them out, you're minimizing your overall risk exposure as the sponsor of that deal. But again, you got to weigh it. With your financing, if the financing's coming into it, if it complicates it, then it's just a matter of, I always say it comes down to, business. What's going to help me get my deal done the quickest? I don't want to overcomplicate it and lose opportunities because of my structuring. And that's, also can happen with entities. And I talk about these general rules that I like to use, but at the end of the day, it's about the deal. It's not about so much the structure. If the structure gets in the way of the deal, I'm going with the deal, and I'll figure that stuff out on the back end.
Awesome. Clint, I'm just so excited by the way that you speak. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about how people in our audience might be able to reach out and engage and contact you? I think this is just super exciting, and at least, I don't know, I'm sold. I mean, in 20 minutes so far, I feel like you've added a ton of value to me in the way that I'm going to be looking at deals going forward.
Yeah, what I would say is this. One of the things that we're big on at Anderson is education. And if people want to learn more, I teach an event every couple of weeks on a Saturday. It's about 7 hours long on tax and asset protection strategies for real estate investors. And if they want to attend, if they're listening here, it's free for them to attend. All they have to do is go to aba.link/screw. That's it. You go to that link, you can register for it. And, I walk you through. It's not like what we're talking about today. I mean, you'll get the same information, but it's much slower because I have all day to do it. But the idea is to open up people's minds and to show them that there are different ways, like I said, to use structures. For example, just the other week, I was talking to a client that wanted to engage in short-term rental arbitrage, which people that don't know what that strategy is, you don't own the property. What you'll do is you'll find some property in a desirable location, you'll get it under lease, and so you'll lease it, and then you're going to turn around and sublease it out to other people on a short-term basis, and then you take the difference. So if my lease payment's $3,000 a month, and I'm making $9,000 from short-term rental income on that place, and I get that difference, which is $6,000. So the individual that was telling me that this is what they were going to start doing, I asked him, I said, well, do you need the income? And he said, well, that's an odd question to ask. I said, well, yeah, do you need the income right now? And he started thinking about it. He goes, not really. And I said, well, how would you like a situation where we could set that structure up for you to what you want to do, and you'll never pay taxes on that income. It'll be completely tax-free to you. And again, he'd already run it by his CPA, and now he's talking to me about this, and no one had brought that up because everyone thinks, well, you do it in your own name or you do it through an LLC or maybe a corporation to help reduce the taxes on that, but they don't think of the fact that, hey, I can take someone that's interested in that strategy. If you got, $6,000, what I would recommend you do is set up a self-directed IRA, Roth, contribute $6,000, or maybe you already have money in there, put it in that IRA, create an LLC that you're the manager of, owned 100% by the IRA, which is a Roth, and then have the LLC enter into the lease agreement with the landlord. You turn around, have that LLC start subleasing that out, and then all that money flows into the LLC, absent what you're paying, completely tax-free. You don't pay tax on the front end, you won't pay taxes on the back end because it's a Roth. And he's just dead silent. You can see the wheels turning. That's what I mean by entities can help you do more if you know how to structure them and they're appropriate for the situation.
I love it, Clint. I love it.
Right on.
This is just amazing. And it's actually kind of interesting that you talk about the rental arbitrage, because that is a hot topic right now. Whenever you go online now in all social media, that's all they talk about, like 90% of the time. whenever you see anything in relation to real estate, to the point where sometimes you start to wonder, it's like, does this even work? I mean, is it just a scam, or is it something that actually can be successful? But
I know.
strategy sounds like it could be sound.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just, looking at things, like I said, from a different perspective. And if you don't need the income, why pay tax on it?
Yeah, very true.
You just got to be careful on the level of services you provide to clients. I go into the details. I'm going to say, listen, you can't be providing concierge style services, because if you're doing that, then you're going to turn it into active income, and it's going to blow this whole thing up, and you're going to pay taxes on it at 37%. So you've got to be not selective, but just careful on how you run the deal.
And in that type of structure, though, since you're not collecting any of the income on it, you're still having to pay the cost of the rental out of pocket, though, during that time.
Comes
So
out of
you're
the
just-
LLC.
Okay,
Yeah, that's why you got to have the money there for that rental agreement to fund that deal.
right.
So if you don't have that money, then it's not going to work. But a
Right.
lot of people that I deal with, they have existing IRAs or 401ks that with a prior employer that they could roll in and then get that thing going.
Cool.
I'd like to introduce our audience to the smallest
Hey,
little.
look at that cute one.
God.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to kick her out of the room right now. Yes.
She's learning how to become an investor early on at only like 1.5 years old.
Wants to be a YouTube star.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Clint, I'm so excited, man. I'm really I'm gonna make sure to sign up for that course that you
Yeah.
do every 2 weeks. And again, I guess we'll put anything that you have in terms of contacting your firm. And again, what was the name of your company? Is it Anderson Business Advisors? Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting. And I know like a lot of the folks in our real estate meetup and some of the other investor communities, I think will be really excited to listen to this episode and to hear about your way of thinking. Because you're right, it's very challenging. It's one of the most common things you hear when you speak to some of these entrepreneurs, some of these investors and deal makers is, oh, I spoke to this lawyer and he said, I can't do this, or I can't, it can't be done. And I think what you're saying is so common, is that a lot of times the professionals that we seek help from have limited experience. It's just very common. And for whatever reason, something I've met as a simple example is wholesaling, right? Wholesaling it's an entire business and it's an entire industry. And I've met a lot of title companies who just say, oh, no, you're not allowed to do that. You can't
Mhm.
assign contracts. And it's just maybe because they're used to seeing the traditional, at least in my area, Northern Virginia Association of Realtors contract, which says you can't assign contracts, but that's that contract. So I think working with a professional who is business minded and entrepreneurial and has had all this experience, I think could just add a ton of value. And I'm going to be in touch. So, Clint, thank you so much. Would you have any last lessons or kind of takeaways that you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off today?
Well, I just think that, like what you stated, is that many times when you run into a challenge like that, you tend to think, all right, well, then I can't do this because this person who I believe is knowledgeable is telling me it doesn't work. When the reality is you just don't have enough information yet. And so until you get the knowing, it's really hard to have the having. And so I tell clients over and over again, get educated. So then when you face a challenge like that, you know how to talk back, push back against that, so you can push through it and get those deals done rather than just walking away and look at that as a lost opportunity. And unfortunately, it happens a lot. We've got a lot of, our clients, we have a certain, we call them platinum clients, service that we provide them. They can call in and ask questions. And 2 months ago, client was buying a property in Florida with a Wyoming limited liability company. Title said there's no way he could close unless that LLC was registered to do business in Florida. Called the title company, said, show me in the law where it states this LLC has to be registered in Florida. She goes, well, it's doing business here. He needs to register. I said, that's a him problem, not a you problem. So show me in the law where you can't close. And all of a sudden it went from not being able to close to, well, he needs to get registered. It's like, fine, you can tell us what we need to do later, but let's get the deal done. And that, I think, a lot of people get cowed by that, and they don't realize that, once you know, then you can start doing more.
Yeah, I think people just get intimidated when they're told no by someone that they think is in a much more knowledgeable position than they are. They immediately cave, and they second guess themselves a lot of times as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Very exciting. One last question, Clint. So you said you have offices in certain states, Washington, but you are able to help. I guess my question is, are you able to help entrepreneurs or investors anywhere in the country?
Yeah, we work nationwide. I mean, our firm is very niche in that we only work with business owners, real estate investors. I mean, probably 75% of our clientele are real estate investors, and we work with them all throughout the U.S. And so, when we talk strategies, we talked about an LLC on this episode. Just because I use the word LLC doesn't mean that's the right structure for every situation. I mean, if you're investing in Florida, I'm probably using a land trust or a series LLC in Texas or a statutory trust in California. And so we're familiar with all 50 states. And what you want to look at when you're building a plan is not only what, asset protection, tax planning, business planning, but also those nuances that come in, such as when you transfer real estate, it's not going to result in a reassessment. It's not going to hit you with increased property taxes. And so what I have found, we have 22 years of experience in doing this, and I myself, I invest all over the United States. There's a methodology there. And so it's not a one size fits all approach. And see, a lot of people get messed up, and they create structures because, the clientele, their CPA in Texas, he likes to use LLC. So then when they buy in Tennessee, they set the same type of structure up, and then they're paying $45,000 a year in taxes because of the franchise tax. And I look at them like, this is a simple one. You're going to love me on this. I'm going to save you 45 grand a year just by making one change to what he had. Because those are the things that a lot of people aren't aware of when they're putting their plans together, because they're just so niche, state specific, county specific.
Awesome. Well, Clint, thank you so much for your time. Really, we're excited to start a friendship with you and to be able to keep in touch.
Likewise, guys.
And don't be surprised if you see us at one of those 2-week at one of your courses there.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.